free. Okay, as I go. So I'm Uri. This is joint work with a PhD student from Barcelona, Daniel, and with a former colleague who's now in Belgium. Okay, so scales, I don't have to convince you that we use them everywhere. Okay, so it's there. I would think of a Net Promoter Score in the same category. I will refer to these scales as evaluative scales, and I'll contrast them to action scales, which is what we're proposing as an alternative to them. And the question that motivates this actually comes from teaching. I don't know if you've ever encountered this in basic decision analysis, when you say, what's the value of information? And the information is only valuable in theory if you could change a decision. And when you think, I would start to think as a professor, when you get a teaching evaluation, let's say a scale out of 7, if I get a 6.3, or if I get a 5.5, I know if I can be happy that evening or sad, but I don't really know what to do. So it's information without value. And if you think about a lot of ratings have that characteristic where you know things are looking good, things are looking less good, but you don't know what to do about it. And so the action scale has this sort of theoretical motivation to be able, ultimately, whoever's collecting the data should know what to do with it. So it's an applied research question. I haven't really done this before. I tend to ask questions that have more theoretical interest. And this is not often done in academia. It's probably going to be a hard project to publish for that reason, because it doesn't fit the mold. On the other hand, I do think we should be doing more of this in social science, to be seeking to solve specific problems, even if theoretically they're less interesting. So sometimes I think social science should be closer to engineering than to physics. Okay. So this project is mid-stage. We run about 6 studies. I think by the time we're done, there'll be 10 or 15 studies. So you're seeing work in progress. In fact, my last slide will invite anybody who's interested in collaborating with testing these ideas outside the lab to do so. We have 1 study with real data, and the rest are with surveys. Okay, so it's about scales. I'm defining this evaluative scale where you ask people how much they like something in a scale, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 7. In an action scale, the way you express as a user your evaluation is through an action that you would attach to your level of satisfaction. I'll show you an example of that in a second. I realize that's not enough to understand. I'm just drawing the contrast at this point. Okay? And so the question for us is, can you design action scales that will extract more signal from the information that the people are providing when they complete the scale? So an example, suppose when you finish an Uber ride, instead of giving the 5 stars, you were asked, okay, in the future, would you like Uber to give preference to this driver over other drivers when you're riding? It's okay if you match me with this person again. Give preference to other drivers. Do not match me with this person again. So this is an action scale because the way I convey my preferences is attached to an action. And the counterpart, Uber, they know what to do with the information without having to do any guesswork. Okay? It has the advantage that not only are they evaluating the driver, they could, in concept, in the algorithm, implement it. So they could actually not match you again with that person. So it's sort of the theoretical value of information is very clear. Okay. So we started thinking, okay, what are the shortcomings? So we have this instinct that evaluative scales are bad. Why are they bad? So we listed a bunch of hypotheses. Okay. One problem with them is that it's unclear what it means to have 4 stars versus 5 stars. Okay? Different people use it differently. So for example, here's one recommendation on how to use the Airbnb scale. 5 is sort of trying to lower the bar, right? Perfection. It's not possible, but we're happy with the experience. And they're trying implicitly to change it that way. But here are other takes. Okay, this is if you search online, what does it mean to have different ratings? I can't wait to come back. So that's a pretty strong endorsement. I'll probably say again, that probably would have been a 5 in the other one. Here's another one. Is 4.5 good enough? That's telling me people don't really know what the scale is. The fact that people have to ask this question, they don't know what it is. They wouldn't ask, what does it mean that you want to be paired with this driver again? There's no ambiguity there. Okay, here's another one. I like number 1. I want to ruin the host. That's what number 1 is. Okay. So this problem of just noise that different people will evaluate differently, it's a problem if you have few evaluations. If you have a lot of them, like if you have 10,000 evaluations or actually 100 evaluations on Amazon, that noise will tend to cancel out because different people will tend to have, you have like a random draw of how people use scales. So this particular problem will be more of a problem when you have few evaluations. So you have like an internal managerial evaluation of your peers or people who work for you, or in academic setting, I'll show you data from that. Okay, that's the first problem. The second problem is a ceiling or floor effect. Yeah.
Quick clarification. Yes. That Uber action scale, is that something Uber is actually doing in some markets?
No. But I would love them to try it. Like if you have any situation that's amenable to that, we want to try it. We'll design an action scale for you and run the study. Okay. So ceiling effects. If we think that if people use the scale this way, like 5 stars is great and anything below it is terrible, you can tell apart the good from the very good. You can tell apart the good from the bad, and that's it. And if you want to provide the best service you can, so if Airbnb wants to promote the best experience possible, if Uber wants to promote the drivers who have the best experience, to provide the best experience possible, if they don't know who they are, they can't do it. And so if you think about the role of the 5 stars, it's falling short. You can act on the information that you want to act on. You can get rid of the really bad drivers, but that's not enough to provide the best service possible. So I can tell you I've been here for 2 weeks. I've taken many lifts. All of them have been 5 stars. In the app, my personal experience hasn't been homogeneous across all of them. But the information I had to begin with and the information that Lyft has in them is completely uniform. Okay, the third problem that we hypothesized is that maybe you feel bad giving a bad evaluation, especially in a one-to-one interaction. The driver tells you about their kids, how they're working 2 shifts, and then, it's kind of a bumpy driver. You feel bad giving them a low star rating. So we ran a study where we had this actually Gen AI image of a driver, and we try to create a link and do that. The last thing we worry about, and this one we haven't yet gotten to, this is the harder problem to solve. You can have heterogeneity, meaning things are different, so different people are evaluating things differently, or different products are being evaluated differently. So for example, if you look at these 2 Bluetooth speakers, one sells for $50, one for $230, they both have really high ratings. That doesn't mean they have the same quality. So if you don't know, if you're new to this market, and you're like, how much should I spend on a Bluetooth speaker? The ratings aren't helping you. And why does Amazon have ratings? So that users can choose what to buy. But it's not useful when you don't know where in the price spectrum you are, like how much you should spend. That seems solvable with a better scale, but we haven't done it yet. And the other one is, different people have different tastes. And so when you see a high rating, what it really tells you, people who wanted to watch this movie liked it. But what if you don't know if you want to watch it? Am I like the people who watch it? And so my example of that makes it clear, almost any TV show that you look for, the second season has better ratings than the first season. Right? It's not because shows get better. It's because who watches the second season? People who like this show. So for example, I showed this as kind of a mediocre show, that's why I chose that. So it went from 4.4 to 4.6, but if you look at the number of reviews, from 11,000 to 1,000. So this is probably not a solid show. You are happy to let it go after 1 season, but you would think that if anything, you should watch the second season. So that's broken, that the scale is not capturing how the people answering the scale are different from one another. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go through the hypothesis and tell you to what extent we have evidence for it, that it happens, and to what extent we have evidence that with the action scale that goes away. So study 1 is going to be data we have from our academic conference. Then we have some Uber scenarios that are aside. Like we're going to show in the first 2 studies that action scales are pretty good. So study 3 is going to ask people, if you had to choose as a user these 2 scales, which one would you like? And then we continue with hypothesis 3, and I haven't done yet anything on hypothesis 4. It's in the to-do list. Okay, so the academic conference. We were hosting an academic conference in Barcelona, so we decided to run a field experiment there. And people submit their papers they want to have presented, like this one, and the organizers need to decide which ones to allow. So they ask reviewers to evaluate the work, and how do they do it? They give ratings, okay? And they need to accept some of that for presentation, some of them they don't. So almost always, these processes, which is the same in journals and the same for grants, use an evaluative scale. Okay? So the question was for us, which scale to use, and can we improve on it? And so it's hard, because this particular conference had a pretty bad scale, and so it would be like a straw man to try to beat it. So we thought, how can we find the best scale available? And so what we did is we went to, we went to the NIH, which they use this scale. It doesn't seem amazing, but it's used to decide on $35 billion a year of grants. So it has some external validity that this is something, if we can beat it, we're doing something meaningful. So we use the NIH scale for our conference as the evaluative scale. And for the action scale, I'll tell you now, okay? So an action scale is not a thing, we don't have one replacement for the 5-star. We say every time you want to evaluate something, you have to think, what's the decision you want to make with the information? And only then you can draw the right scale. So we say, okay, what do we have to do? We need to decide whether we accept a submission, and in what background, what other information do you need? You want some diversity of topics, right? So you don't want all talks to be about nudging, or all talks to be about incentives, or freaking ratings, right? Because that would be boring if everything was the same. So you say, well, we have 2 good ratings talks already, we're not going to accept a 3rd one. So we need to ask reviewers, do you want to accept this in the context of what else is being accepted? But it's hard because we don't know the pool when they do evaluating. They don't know the pool. So the question we asked was like this. Highest rating is definitely accepted. Probably accepted unless you have too many like it. Probably not accepted unless you have nothing like it. Or don't accept it even if it means the conference is short. Like this is clearly this is below the bar no matter what else is out there. Now, so we're going to be comparing a 4-point scale to the NIH. It's not perfectly clean. It's kind of hard to manipulate something because we're comparing 2 scales. It's not something we usually do. Okay, so I'm aware of this confound. NIH has 9 items. We have 4. Maybe it's one number of items. I can take care of that in the Uber studies later in the hypotheticals. The other one is that this is a story almost, and the other one is just a word. And I'm going to claim that that's okay, because the whole point of the action is you're trying to describe what's the consequence of doing that. Try to do that with the 4th stars. Like, you really can't describe the 4th star with a long sentence without, in a way, starting to get into the action you want to do with it. That's my claim. So I grant that confound and move on. Given it, and then it's not all, and we'll try to better as well. We couldn't test it further because we barely had enough data to have the 2 scales. Okay. I have until 55, correct? Until.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we had 352 papers that were submitted to the conference. Each was assigned 4 reviewers. How many of them submitted their responses? Not all of them did. We got 3.5. So this is, you see that number of papers. So how many papers? 200 papers got 4 reviewers, and the rest got 3 and 2 and so on. That's just to describe the data. You have a sense. There's 67 people. They reviewed a bunch for us. And the reviewer was assigned to one of 2 conditions. They use either evaluation scale, our action scale, or the traditional NIH evaluation scale. And there were 2 in each. Okay. And this gives you a sense of the distribution of ratings. Okay, so there were about 65, 75 submissions. Don't accept it no matter what else is in the conference. We're confident. Okay. Now, is it better? How do we know the action scale is better? Now, it's hard because we don't know the ground truth. I don't know how good the talk would be had it been given, how much we would have liked it. So there's a usual workaround to this problem, which in jargon is inter-rate reliability, which is like, do they agree? If the 2 reviewers agree, they're probably onto something, and if they disagree, maybe the scale is problematic. So what I want to do is I want to predict what one reviewer said with what the other reviewer said. Okay? Now suppose they were clones. So the 2 reviewers think exactly the same, then the coefficient of regression would be 1. When one goes up by 3 points, the other goes up by 3 points. And if they were basically coin flips, how they were deciding, the coefficient would be 0. So it's between coin flips and clones. That's sort of the scale. Okay? Now what we find is, and this surprised us a little low, but when I looked at the literature, that's as high as it gets, it turns out. The coefficient is 0.3. So that means if I want to predict what one reviewer did, based on what the other reviewer did, one goes up by 1, the other on average goes up by 3. So it's kind of closer to coin flips. But if you compare it to the evaluative scale, it's higher than it. Okay? I'm hesitant to say it's 3 times better because why is it bilinear? But it's not almost the same. Okay. So there's some issues with the simple analysis that I'm doing, which is maybe predicting 9 points is harder. Like there's more variation. Who knows if it's harder? So this is my favorite analysis of the whole project so far. Okay, to me it's the equivalent of It's going to be like a one-on-one game. And one player is going to block the shot of the other player, run with it, and do like a 360 dunk on it. Okay, that's the way I think of it. Okay, so why is that? I'm going to ask, can I predict with the action scale the evaluation scale of one reviewer better than if I use the other evaluative scale? Okay, can my 4-item action scale predict one reviewer with an evaluation scale better than the other reviewer with a 9-point evaluation scale? If it can, then that's a dunk that I'm referring to. Okay, and these are the two results that I show you. So we have in the x-axis is which variable am I predicting? I'm predicting. Doesn't have a. Oh, it doesn't have a copy. So this is the 0.1 and 0.2 that I showed you earlier, right? So if I'm an action scale predicting an action scale, my coefficient is 0.29. If I'm an evaluation scale predicting an evaluation scale, my coefficient is 0.1. If I'm an action scale predicting an evaluation scale, I do twice as well. I'm more comfortable saying this is more than twice as well. So this tells me I'm capturing signal. I'm not just trying. I don't know if that comparison is clear to the audience. And then the evaluation scale does not do that nearly as well as the action scale predicting the action scale. So that I interpret as there's real signal that I'm extracting with the action scale, not with the other one. And I'm going to move, in the interest of time, there's a whole thing we do with standardizing the scores, meaning we convert them to how extreme they are for the individual rater. And I'll just tell you, you don't beat. When you do that, you don't beat the action scale, and the action scale still outperforms the evaluative scale. I want to tell you about the other stuff, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so this was a little tricky. The good news for us is all the other studies are much easier to interpret than this one. This was tricky because it was observational data. We have a lot of moving pieces. Okay, ceiling effects. So we wanted to generate Uber experiences that would be great, good, bad, and slightly bad. Ask people to rate them, and ask, could Uber figure out which of them it was? Okay, so it was a big, messy experiment. There were 4 scales. So we had the usual 5-star. We have the 4 items action scale that I told you at the beginning. I want to write with this person again. And then to make sure it wasn't the number of items, we also had a 4-star rating. And we also had a 4-star with labels saying what does 4-star means, but in evaluative, just to maximize comparability. Okay. So with that, and we cross that with, that's it, right? We cross that with, was it a great experience, standard experience, and so on. Okay. So I said all that. So here's here are the stimuli we used. So if it was a great experience, we said something like the driver over water and some sweets. If it was a slightly bad experience, they listened to music too loudly. If it's a highly bad experience, they were on the phone the whole time. Okay. So the point is, Uber wants to know how did it go during your ride. Can they figure it out with the star rating? Can they figure it out with the action scale? We're good. So contrary to our expectations, overall, the action scale didn't perform overall the star rating. It didn't. Okay, and that's what we expected. But we did determine the ceiling effect that was quite marked. This is highly statistically significant, but given that we weren't expecting only there, we're going to replicate it. We haven't yet, but we will replicate it. Given it's a pretty strong effect. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on the standard versus great, where you see the ceiling. Okay, with the 5-star rating, which we call between 0 and 4, you get a 3.84, so basically 4.84 stars, no matter which of the two you do. No matter whether it was a good experience or a great experience. So like when they go out of the way, when they go the extra mile, you don't pick it up in the 5-point scale. Not significant. With the action scale, you get a very highly significant result, less than 1 in 1,000. With the other 2 scales, no difference either. So if you do 4 points instead of 5, and if you label it, you don't care. So the way we think of that is these solves would, in our mind, like as users, seems like the biggest problem with scales with Airbnb and with Uber, which is you get ceiling effects, you really can't tell apart the good from the great. Would people like this if you offer it to them? Would they like it? So we asked them. We asked 300 people and prolific, so this is a varied sample of people. Imagine Uber were to choose between these two. which of these two scales would you prefer? Okay? And we realize the irony that this is arguably an evaluative scale, but it's also arguably an action scale. It's kind of hard to measure with action. Here we want to have a gradient. So we ask, I strongly prefer scale 1 or strongly prefer scale 2. Okay? Here's the distribution of their preferences. What we pre-graded said, what we said ahead of time we would do, so we were going to compare the mean rating to the midpoint, and we get statistically significantly above it, so there's statistically significant preference for the action scale. And if you just look at the ratio, the way you would, like in an election, it's not quite 2 to 1, but it's in that neighborhood of 2 to 1 preference for it. We also asked them open-ended, why do you prefer this scale over the other? And we have all the 300 responses. We asked ChatGPT to summarize it for us. And so here's what ChatGPT said. This is ChatGPT's summary of real answers by humans about why they prefer action scale. Right? This is not an AI-generated answer, it's just a summary. And so it makes it easier to understand, which is what we're trying to say. We know it directly will affect my future experience, so it's an action consequence. It provides meaningful input, and there's no ambiguity. Right? So great. People are perceiving the value that we think we are creating. How about the star rating? What do they like about it? They basically like that they know it. That's familiarity. So our read of this is they'll get over it. Because if it's just familiarity, there's nothing inherently wrong with the action scale, nothing inherently good about the star rating. We're just used to it. Okay, so they'll get used to the new one. Okay. So how they 3 minutes, something like that? Okay, so the last ones that I'll present is social pressure. So like I mentioned, we were worried that people would not feel comfortable giving a negative evaluation in stars to a driver they sort of became familiar with, but with the action scales that'll be fine. So how do you measure that? This is actually tricky to do. And the idea was, well, suppose that, like basically when I know there's a gap between what they really feel and what they tell Uber. Now, how do you know what they really feel? So we told them, imagine a friend asks you how the ride went versus imagine Uber asked you how the ride went. And we thought, maybe to the friend you say it was 3 stars, but to Uber you say 5 stars. Okay? Everyone in the sample, I would consider like this pilot early stages, we didn't even have the action scale. We just wanted to see, can we get social desirability with the stars? If we do, we'll try to make it go away with the action. If we don't get it, then there's no point in running the action. Okay? So in this case, we use Midjourney, which is better than ChatGPT for images, and DALL-E. And so we either the friend asks or the Uber asks. Okay, and the prediction was it's going to be a higher rating for Uber because it's a slightly negative experience, so it should be higher with Uber. And just to give you a sense of the participants, so we had a bunch of pictures, different races, genders, and ages, and then it read how the ride went, and then if Uber asks you, or if a close friend asked you, and we repeat twice, what will you tell your friend, what will you tell Uber, okay? And those are the results that we were expecting. Those are not the results we got. We got nothing. We got no effect. Okay, no difference. This took hours to design the study to make it clean. There's no effect whatsoever. So it's okay, let's push it further. Let's make it, you really, because we thought this picture of the person looking back at you, that's why we used ChatGPT or generative AI. We wanted to feel like you're having a connection, not just a random picture. It didn't work at 1 minute. Let's maximize the social pressure. And so you're staying at Airbnb and it's somebody's home. You're renting a room in their home. And what you don't like about the experience, it's something they have to experience. So we wanted to just maximize it. Same design, right? So be something like your Airbnb asks you or a close friend, and it'd be things like they have a central AC unit that's very loud, or a dog that's barking at night. We had also you have to climb up the hill to get to the house. We thought people would feel uncomfortable. And again, those are the results that we were expecting, but we got nothing. So we tried, maybe people don't want to tell us. I'm of 2 minds. Maybe, in fact, this doesn't matter. That's one possibility. The other possibility is you need to have a much more realistic experience for people to actually feel bad. For example, it's very hard to get people to say, one second, I'll take a question. It's very hard to get people to say, I wouldn't submit a rating at all. We haven't been able to get that over 15%. In reality, that number is very, very high. And so I think we're missing some of the reality of the experience of having the phone. that's one of the reasons I'm excited to find somebody who wants to run this in the field. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've had success in the past with turning that question around and making it more projective. So instead of saying, what would you tell your friend? You change it to say, if your friend had the same experience, what would they tell you? Because that changes it from, it's not me rating it anymore, it's my friend rating it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried that.
We tried something similar. We tried,
Okay.
what do you think other people would do?
Okay, all right. Same.
And we also got,
Nothing.
I mean, very close to zero affected, just surprisingly close to zero. Okay, so this is the last slide, which I think is good timing. I've said this many times. If you want to get in contact, that's my website, and we can do that. I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
You do have.